Hi everybody, this is Mrs. Ayala bringing you another PowerPoint, this time about integrating quotes into paragraphs. So let's get started. I want you to be smooth analytical writers, and here's how to do it. First of all, I want to review the Oreo cookie. We've talked about this before, but it's really important that you understand this concept when you're analytically writing these papers and creating these paragraphs. And I promise you, if there was one thing that my students keep coming back to me and saying that's useful, it's the Oreo cookie. If there's one thing you remember this year, remember the Oreo cookie. So we have a top cookie, and the point of the top cookie is that it stands for the introduction to the quote. Okay? So here's what you need. Here's some key questions. Who is speaking? For what reason? To whom? When you're giving quotes about Les Miserables, you can't assume that we know that Javert is the one that's speaking or that Jean Valjean is speaking. You need to make sure that you give us some context for that quote. You also need to make sure that you're introducing the quote for a reason, like you have some sort of a point you're getting at. And so you want to introduce that point. Okay, introduce what is it that you're really trying to illustrate. So all of these things need to happen in your Oreo cookie. But keep in mind, your job is to be concise, so it shouldn't happen in any more than maybe 1 to 2 sentences tops. It really shouldn't take long. Next is the cream filling, which everybody knows is the best part of the Oreo. And granted, the illustration I have here is just stuffed full of the cream inside the Oreo, but really you only need one good quote. It doesn't have to be a whole paragraph long in order for it to be good, but it does have to be long enough so that we have enough cream filling in this Oreo to provide some proof. I mean, if you only have 2 words in the quote, it's going to be very hard to prove your ideas. So the cream filling stands for evidence. The top Oreo cookie is introducing the point, right? What is the point you're trying to make? What is the meaning you're trying to get at? It's a mini thesis statement. And what is the context? And finally, you need the evidence. So where do you have proof of this statement? If you're saying that Javert only follows the law, well, you need proof of that. You can't say something like that without following it up with some sort of proof. So anytime you make a statement that something's true about a certain character or some meaning is something that the author's trying to get at, then you immediately need to follow that statement up with some sort of proof. So in the case of literature, that proof is quotes. If you were writing for history, if you were writing for some other purpose, then you might need an example, a statistic, a reason. If it were science, you would need a study that would prove your idea. Okay, so in the case of literature, you need a quote from the text. Show me where in the text you're seeing this to be true. If you can't show me where it is in the text, then I'm not going to believe you and I'm going to discount what it is that you're saying. Because many times people love to say a lot of things about literature, but they don't necessarily read very carefully enough to find the proof. So you need the proof. Okay, finally the bottom cookie. And look at how beautiful this Oreo cookie, it's actually a cake, is on this platter, but I want you to think of your Oreo cookie paragraph as like you are serving it up on this beautiful platter. You're trying to create this beautiful presentation of the paragraph. And to do that, you need to be very careful about how you set up that Oreo cookie, and you really just need to display it, and it needs to be beautiful. Okay, so you need all of the parts of it. You can't make it messy. You can't have some of the cream like falling out. You can't have the top Oreo cookie all askew. You can't have one of the layers missing. It just wouldn't look right. So the same goes for the bottom cookie. Sometimes you think that you can just give a quote and your reader is just going to know what it is you're trying to get at because you're giving that quote, but that's not the case. Sometimes your reader doesn't know what you're getting at. So you have to follow up that quote by telling us what exactly we're supposed to get out of it. You can't just restate the quote or paraphrase it word for word. Okay? You can't do that. You have to explain which words are contributing to the point that I'm trying to make. How are they revealing that what I'm saying is true? Lay it all nicely out for them. Finally, I want to talk about integrating a quote smoothly. Take a look at the following examples, and I'm going to give you a few seconds to look at this. Which quote is integrated smoothly in the following examples and why? If you're watching this on a video, then you should pause it at this point. read carefully, and have a little bit of a discussion as to why this is. Okay, if you've had a chance to pause this, now hopefully you're ready to say a few things. In A, Emily Dickinson was preoccupied about religion. Faith is a fine invention for gentlemen who see, but microscopes are prudent in an emergency. Her verses, though, show her practicality. When I read this paragraph, it looks like I put in the quote later. First, I wrote the paragraph, Emily Dickinson was preoccupied about religion. Her verses, though, show her practicality. And then later, I just kind of threw in a quote in the middle just to kind of round this out. I can tell when you're doing that. If I can just lift out that quote and suddenly, like, the paragraph seems to flow smoothly, then I know that you put in the quote later. I can tell that. And that means that it's not really a smooth integration. There's choppiness. When the quote is floating all by itself and it's not put into a sentence by adding some clauses or phrases to it, it doesn't look smooth. It looks choppy. It makes you stop as a reader, read the quote, and then have to start up again to read the next sentence. It doesn't flow. In the second one, you notice I have the quote integrated with that beautiful colon there, which is seen in the following lines. That kind of connects it to the previous part, right? I give my context. This is a poem, okay? I'm giving some lines. I'm also, explaining my point a little bit. Then, after the quote, I'm talking about specific words and specific parts that I want my reader to pay attention to. So I'm giving a full explanation of the quote. Clearly, I didn't just choose this quote randomly after I wrote the paragraph. Okay, here's some key points. The quote shouldn't read as if it was chosen after the essay was written. When quotes stand all by themselves as a sentence with the quotation marks around them, they tend to provide choppiness to a paragraph. When quotes are attached to phrases, clauses, or other parts of the sentence, they tend to flow better. Let me give you another example. In the first example, when Emily Dickinson writes that faith is a fine invention, she means that while faith sounds lovely, it doesn't require proof. Here you see a part of a quote that's integrated into a sentence. Okay? Instead, note how choppy it is and how it forces you to pause when you have to read the quote as a separate entity. Dickinson thinks that faith requires proof. Faith is a fine invention. These two parts sound very choppy. They don't even seem like they flow together. Now let's practice again. Which of the following is a complete Oreo cookie and why? Again, here's where you're going to want to pause the video so that you can check it out and discuss it. And now that you've had a chance to pause it and give it a good discussion, you should have chosen B. Why? Because in A, the order is completely wrong. You're giving this piece of evidence all the way at the beginning, then you're kind of going off on a tangent. We're not quite sure exactly what we're supposed to get out of this quote. And in the last sentence it says, as you can see from the quote, she thought that microscopes are handy and that faith is a fine invention. Okay? I can tell that already from the quote. So you're just rewording the quote. So what's your point here? Okay, so we kind of get lost in our thought process in A, but in B, as you can see, all the parts are exactly in the place where they should be. We give a context in the first part. Then we give an example that integrates smoothly into the quote. You'll see we have a nice little clause. For example, she refers to faith as a, and it automatically flows into that quote nicely. Okay? Then we follow it up by explaining exactly what we want the reader to look at. And we even use a term, diction, her choice of diction when associating faith with invention. And so not only are we using the term, but we're giving a clear explanation of the writing technique and why it's being used and what it's supposed to mean, which ties it all up nicely. And we use that nice formal vocabulary just to kind of give some good presentation to it. So I hope this little tutorial helps you. This is what I'm looking for when I'm looking for discussion responses. And keep in mind that if you are quoting Les Miserables, you're also going to need to give me a page number at the end of those quotes, in the same way that as I'm quoting these poems here, I'm giving line numbers. Okay, good luck everybody.